that's what he would do. And when he couldn't, like, he hurt his foot one year and couldn't golf as much, and like it really wore on him. He really needed to get out and do that. So that's the thing. Like, everybody's got something. Mine was art. So mine was, and it was almost any kind of art at that point, like when I was younger. So then fast forward to the art therapy degree. Also, what interested me in that was the psychology portion of it, because as a teenager, like, and, in my 20s and stuff, what I always read, like the books I would read would be like philosophy and neuroscience and brain stuff, like it wasn't ever just like, a fun fiction read. Like, it was, to me, that was pretty fascinating to learn about the brain and psychology and how we behave, the whole brain and behavior connection. So then when somebody told me about art therapy, it was almost kind of surreal, because I'm like, seriously, like, there's a program that connects art and psychology, and that's, completely what I, gravitated towards my whole life. So it really made sense to go into that.
So is it that long after you get your bachelor's that you start the shift to the art therapy and the master's degree?
I think it was 5 years.
Okay.
So it had been 5 years, and at that time when I started, I had a 2-year-old child, and so start the program, not just for art therapy, but I also decided to get my teaching certificate at the same time.
Because art therapy just wasn't enough.
Why stop there? Just keep taking all the classes. And what I thought would be great would be to do art therapy in schools, right? Because that would be really cool. And the program was supposed to be like a combined program, so it shouldn't have been as lengthy as like 2 whole programs, but it was. It took me 6 years, and that was like full time. So taking classes full time, 6 years. Had another baby in there, and
wow.
So now I've got 2 little kids. My mom and my mother-in-law, babysitting any chance they could, which was really, really great. It was awesome that they were able to do that. And so during the whole art therapy and teaching certificate, in art therapy is when I started doing more of the fiber art. We had an assignment to somehow represent like some important events in our life that had happened. And I chose to represent them in fiber arts. So I had been knitting, because now I have little babies, so I'm like knitting blankets or something, right? I still don't have not very great at knitting at that point, but I started making this project of, it was kind of a biography, right? So it was, somehow we were supposed to represent these important events in our life, and so I was knitting small panels and then painting on them. And it was that project very specifically that really triggered the love of fiber art. And I hadn't done, like, when I think about how the progression happened, I realized that fiber art, like the methods, the techniques for fiber art, the fabrics and all that, had been there from the beginning, but it never really occurred to me until, like way later. It's like, oh my gosh, wait, I was doing that in undergrad with the metals. I was doing that. I was stitching onto my clothes. I was making my own clothes. Like, I was doing those things already, and it just took however long it took, to finally embrace it and do more of fiber art as my chosen medium. I still paint and I still play around with other things, but fiber art is really the one thing that's super consistent and the most satisfying, I think, right now.
All right, so I'm going to play dumb for a second, but what exactly encompasses the world of fiber art?
Okay, anything that has some sort of fabric, I would say, like, although paper is also considered fiber art, because it's made with fibers. And so knitting, crocheting, embroidery. So embroidery is mostly what I do with fiber art.
It's good
weaving.
Stuff.
Weaving is very interesting and very cool. And then sewing, like clothes, like wearable art, things like that, hats. You know. Yeah, so anything to do with the fabric. Yeah.
So the art therapy program is good, and you get your master's degree.
Get a master's degree in education with a focus in art therapy.
And where do you go from there?
Well, then I have to get a ton of hours training. Had to do a few internships, but that was during the program. And after I finished the art therapy degree, I actually started working for a company that treated adults that had traumatic brain injuries. So we did art therapy there. There's not a whole lot of places, especially in Michigan, there's not a lot of places that have a full-time art therapist. So this facility was pretty fortunate that they were able to provide art therapy for their clients. So it was pretty fascinating to be able to work with some people that had some very severe brain injuries, but to be able to help them rehabilitate and regain some of their processing and just their ability to manage their emotions. So that was a lot of what we would be doing in the art therapy.
And so what happens after that?
After that, I open up my own art therapy studio office. My husband, at the time in 2014, he had a large warehouse place to do his business, which was rock climbing holds.
Wow.
So he did, he did that for years. And in 2014, like, he was in a different building, and then he moved to this place in Livonia, so it had some office space up front, which was perfect for art therapy. So I had my own studio, basically, when I didn't have clients, so I could make whatever art I wanted to make, and then I could see some clients for art therapy, and I had, like, all the art supplies. Like, probably every artist has, like, a million things that could be for art, you know? It's all good. It's all useful. So I was able to, use what I had, and we definitely did a lot of fiber art, which is, it's super relaxing, and I would be able to have, like, a client doing some abstract embroidery where you're just stitching and choosing colors, and it's very intuitive. And then when we talk about it, certain things come up. Like, you may choose a color and not realize, like, oh, that reminds me of this person that I've been thinking about, and so it's all related in that way. So it's a pretty fascinating process.
Now, do you usually work one-on-one?
Yes. I usually do work one-on-one. I have done groups in the past. I do not have that studio anymore. Closed that last November. My husband had sold his business, so he wasn't doing that anymore, and having, like, all that space was just way too much for me. Like, I definitely didn't need that much space. So now I travel to clients' homes and do one-on-one art therapy that way. And I'm also working with a hospital, Henry Ford Health Systems, doing art therapy groups for caregivers. They have a program that they they do events for caregivers, and art therapy is one of the things that they offer. So I'm able to do that.
And now, when someone comes to you and wants to use you as their art therapist, are you just strictly fiber art for them?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. It's really, so if somebody calls and, they want to do art therapy, I have a ton of materials that I can bring, different types of art supplies and such. And it always starts with where they are at and what they're comfortable with. There's a lot of people are not, they don't think they're creative. So a lot of times they're like, oh, I can't draw. No, I can't do that. I'm like, well, you're not graded. This isn't like, we're not in school or anything. Don't worry about it. You can do the stuff that I'm going to ask you to do. And then there's other clients that I have that they're artists, and that's why they want to do art therapy, because that's a medium that they're so comfortable with already that it's just easier for them. So it's always about, working with the client from where they're at and going that way. But I definitely offer using fiber art as part of the process. So there's always that choice.
Do they usually know when they want you to be their art therapist what kind of art they want to do in the therapy, or do you help choose that for them?
It totally depends on the person. Some people know right away. And most of the time, the first time that I see a client, I'll have a handful of different materials that they're going to give a completely different feel to them. Like if you've done watercolor, that's a lot different than a pencil, which is different from, oil pastels or something softer like that. So when I have a client that isn't sure what they want to use, like here's a handful of different materials, so they can play around with them and usually discover what they like and what they don't like.
And you said certain colors may bring up certain things.
Yes, not because the colors have certain meanings in themselves, but because they mean something to you.
To you, right. It means something to the individual.
Yeah, like for instance, I was making an embroidery piece, so it was abstract embroidery. I was using some yarn that had been left over after I made my mom a scarf. So I used that, and I put that yarn in my piece. And then I had pulled in some blue fabric or threads from a different project. And as I stitched the piece, like I realized the colors were like my sister's favorite color is blue. I think her favorite color is blue. Her eyes are blue. So like the blue color was like the color of her eyes. So it reminded me of my sister. And the other fibers that I used were something from my mom. And then there was a piece that was something from me. So it was like, it turned into like this family type of piece. Do you know what I mean? Like it just involved all these things that reminded me of my mom and my sister. So it was pretty interesting.
And clients go through this process with you.
Yes.
And is writing part of that too, or is it just?
It can be.
It can be.
Yeah, writing can definitely be part of it. I had a client one time who, as they're working on a piece, and it was a painting, watercolor, playing around with it, really dark colors, talking the whole time, and talking about the issues that they were struggling with as they were working on the watercolor, and just kind of going over their piece a million times. And towards the end of what they were talking about in our conversation, they answered some of the issues themselves, and all the colors and shapes that they were working with changed. So it turned from like some dark colors into, and at first it was dark and disorganized, and as they talked through what was bothering them, the image itself became more organized and brighter in colors. So it was a really fascinating process to watch them do that.